Okay, so let's be honest.
Hmm.
This past week, I don't know about you, but it's been making me kind of nervous about flying.
Oh, yeah.
7 major aviation accidents in just
Oh,
a few days,
yeah.
and all across the world.
Yeah.
It's enough to make anyone reconsider that next vacation. You know what I mean?
It's certainly a bit of a concerning pattern we're seeing here. Yeah, I'd say definitely raises some questions about where aviation safety is at right now.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a deep dive into these accidents.
Okay.
We've got some really interesting sources here that we're going to be pulling from.
Yeah.
Some of it's, scientific analysis of what happened.
Right.
And then we're also going to look at some of the conspiracy theories that are floating around out there.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, but before we get into all of that,
Hmm.
I think it's important to lay out the facts for everyone. So just to give everyone a sense of the scope of what we're talking about here, these accidents happened in Brazil, Russia, South Korea, Canada, the UAE, Norway, and Germany,
Wow.
all in the span of a week. 7 incidents.
Yeah, it's a global phenomenon for sure. And, each accident is obviously unique. But I think if we lay out all the details here,
Yeah.
we might start to see some connections between these accidents.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
December 22nd in Brazil, a small plane, um, it was attempted to make an emergency landing.
Mm.
It crashed in a residential area of Gramado.
Oh, no.
And tragically, 10 people were killed in the crash.
Oh, wow.
Plus, there were 12 people on the ground who were injured.
That's terrible.
It seems like it was caused by some kind of mechanical failure, which is, it's just a sobering reminder. I mean,
Yeah.
even these small planes, they're
Oh,
still
yeah.
complex machines.
Right.
And then just a few days later, this Christmas Day, an Azerbaijani aircraft, this one went down near Grozny in Russia.
Hmm.
And this was also during an emergency landing
Oh, wow.
because of engine trouble. Now, in this one, 38 people died, but thankfully 29 passengers survived. So we've got 2 emergency landings here that went wrong. I mean, it makes you wonder if, is this a trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, it does make you wonder.
And then December 28th, there was a really bad fire on a Boeing 737-800. This was while it was landing at Muan International Airport in South Korea.
Okay.
I think it was a fuel leak.
Hmm.
It led to 179 fatalities. Only 2 people survived.
Oh, my goodness.
It's awful. But here's the thing. That same day, in Canada, there was a really similar incident.
Really?
Yeah. A Bombardier Q400 had problems with its landing gear when it was coming into Halifax. It skidded off the runway and caught fire,
Oh, wow.
but every single passenger got out without serious injuries. All 59 of them.
Oh, that's incredible. So 2 incidents on the same day,
Correct.
both with landing gear problems and fire, and yet 2 completely different outcomes.
It really makes you think about what causes such different results in
Yeah.
these situations. I mean, what's the difference between a tragedy and everyone walking away? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
So then, the next day, December 29th, we have a training flight that crashes off the coast of Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE. It was a small plane, and both the pilot and the co-pilot were killed.
Mhm.
They're still figuring out what happened, but they think it was either a technical problem or pilot error.
It's scary to think about because even in these controlled training environments, things can still go wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, this just shows that human error, even with all the advancements in technology we've had,
Right.
human error is still a major factor in these accidents.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go back to December 28th in Norway. A Dutch aircraft, this one skidded off the runway while it was landing at Oslo Airport. This one was because of really heavy ice. But luckily, everyone on board survived, all 182 passengers.
Wow. That incident really raises some concerns about how climate change is going to impact safety in the air.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more these icy conditions and extreme weather events.
Right.
And these are things that we're just starting to understand how they impact flights.
And it feels like the airlines are struggling to keep up with this.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay, and then, last but not least, December 29th, a small plane crashes in Stuttgart, Germany. It was trying to land in some pretty bad weather conditions.
Hmm.
2 people were injured, and one of them critically.
Oh, gosh.
So there you have it. 7 accidents, all in just a little over a week.
Hmm.
And each one has its own unique circumstances.
Right.
But I think as we start to dig a little deeper here, I think we're going to find some disturbing patterns.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, that many accidents in such a short time, it really makes you think, that there might be some underlying problems here. Like, are there systemic issues that are contributing to all of this?
Okay, so let's move past just like the what happened part of all of this. Let's try to figure out why this happened. The sources we're looking at today give us kind of two different perspectives. One of them is, a scientific approach.
Hmm.
It focuses on the actual tangible factors that might have played a role in these accidents. And then the other perspective we have is, well, it's a little more out there. It's the conspiracy theories that some people believe are at the heart of this really tragic week.
I'm intrigued.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
So let's start with the science. And right away, a couple of factors really jump out as possibilities for why these accidents might have happened. One is the huge amount of pressure on the entire industry.
Hmm.
I mean, the demand for air travel is only going up.
Right.
So is that forcing airlines to cut corners? What kind of shortcuts might airlines be taking to keep their costs down and make sure flights keep happening frequently?
That's a huge question, right? I mean, all this pressure could definitely lead to shortcuts when it comes to maintenance or safety procedures.
Right.
And ultimately, that could put passengers at risk. I mean, look at the crashes in Russia and South Korea.
Right.
Those were older aircraft that were involved, which makes you wonder about airlines flying older planes to save money.
So you're saying that these budget airlines, while they might be appealing to our wallets,
Right.
they might actually be putting us in danger because they're cutting corners.
It's something to consider, for sure. Especially when you look at those two crashes that involved older planes.
Yeah.
It's a little chilling, to be honest.
Yeah, no kidding. And this whole cost-cutting thing raises a really disturbing possibility, which is actually mentioned in our sources here. Some of these events could actually
Like
be...
intentional acts of sabotage. Yeah, it's not a pleasant thought,
Right.
but given what we're looking at here, I think it's something we need to at least consider.
It's a scary thought, to be honest. I mean, we put so much trust in these airlines to get us where we need to go safely, right?
Absolutely.
But if even a few of these crashes were done on purpose, it makes you really question, just how safe we are in the world.
Yeah, it really does make you think. But before we go too far down that road, let's maybe come back to something we touched on earlier about the impact of climate change on all of this. It's something that the scientific analysis really highlights.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That incident in Norway where the plane skidded on the ice,
Yeah.
it's like a perfect example of how even what seems like a minor weather event,
Yeah,
it can have these huge consequences.
absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, are we only seeing the tip of the iceberg here?
Yeah.
Like, how is climate change really going to impact air travel in the future? It's kind of scary to think about.
You're hitting on a really important point there because it's not just about icy runways. We're talking about increased turbulence, more lightning strikes, and potentially even more extreme weather events. I mean, all of that could disrupt flights. And worst case scenario, yeah, it could even lead to more accidents.
I know more delays, cancellations, and maybe even more accidents.
Yeah, it's not exactly what you want to hear when you're planning that next trip.
No, not at all.
I think it really raises a question for the industry, though. How are they going to adapt to all of these changes? I think we need to see airlines investing in new technology and new infrastructure to make flying safer.
So what kind of technologies are we talking about here? Like, is
Hmm.
there anything out there that can actually help planes fly safely in these unpredictable conditions?
Yeah, there's a lot of research and development happening right now. For example, there are these new weather detection systems that give pilots really accurate and up-to-date information about conditions up ahead. There's also work being done on de-icing technologies that are even better than what we have now, and even on aircraft designs that are better at handling turbulence.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better knowing that they're at least working on this.
Yeah,
But let's be realistic, technology can only do so much.
right,
I mean, we've seen it over and over again.
right.
Human error plays a huge role in aviation incidents,
Mm-hmm.
like that training flight that crashed in the UAE.
Absolutely.
It's a stark reminder of that.
You're absolutely right. Even with all the amazing technology we have, the human factor is still crucial. And that brings us back to this idea of sabotage, maybe disguised as negligence.
Okay, so how can we even tell the difference between an accident that was caused by, just someone cutting corners because of all this pressure they're under,
Right.
and an accident that was actually sabotage? Like, how can we know?
That's a tough question. It really comes down to how thoroughly these incidents are investigated. I mean, you'd need these forensic teams going through everything, maintenance logs, communication records, even examining the wreckage itself. They'd be looking for any little clue that points to foul play.
So it's like a detective novel, but with incredibly high stakes.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a lot of expertise, advanced technology, And you really have to understand both aviation systems and how people think. It's complex.
And if someone's smart enough to sabotage a plane in the first place, wouldn't they also be smart enough to cover their tracks to make it look like an accident?
That's the biggest challenge investigators face, for sure. It's a real battle of wits trying to outsmart someone who's gone to great lengths to hide what they did.
Pretty scary thought. So if we even entertain this possibility of sabotage, even just for a second,
Mhm.
it makes you wonder about motives, right?
Yeah.
Like, who would do such a thing?
Yeah.
And why?
Well, the sources you shared mentioned a few possibilities. One is corporate sabotage, which is basically rival companies trying to get rid of competition. They're trying to get ahead in the market.
It's like something you'd see in a movie about Wall Street, like high-stakes business deals,
Yeah.
people using cutthroat tactics, and then, in the end, innocent people get caught in the middle.
It's a grim picture to paint, but it's not outside the realm of possibility in the world of business.
No, it's not.
And then there's also this idea of state-sponsored sabotage, which might be done for political reasons or even as a form of economic warfare.
Yeah, that adds a whole other layer to it, doesn't it? It makes you think about global security and international relations. This is getting really complex.
It is. And then, of course, we have to mention the more fringe theories, the ones that get into the real conspiracy territory.
Ah, yes, the conspiracy theories. Our sources did mention a few. One that really jumped out at me was this idea of a cyber attack. Like, imagine someone hacking into a plane's systems and causing it to crash. I mean, planes are so reliant on software these days.
Right.
It's not totally crazy to think that that could happen.
Yeah, cybersecurity experts have been warning about this for years, actually. And while we don't have any evidence to suggest that any of these recent crashes were caused by hacking, it's definitely a vulnerability that the industry needs to be aware of.
So it's like yet another thing to worry about when you're up in the air.
Right.
Is anyone doing anything about this?
Oh, absolutely. Airlines and the companies that make planes are putting a lot of money into cybersecurity. They're doing things like strengthening their firewalls, encrypting their data, and implementing systems to detect intrusions. They're trying to stay ahead of any potential attackers.
It sounds like an ongoing battle. It's like the good guys are always trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
That's a good way to put it. It really emphasizes the importance of staying vigilant and adapting as the threats change.
So we've got corporate sabotage, attacks sponsored by governments, and now cyber terrorism. Are there any other conspiracy theories in our sources?
Well, there's one that's even more out there than the others. This one suggests that these accidents are all part of some bigger plan, like a plan to control the population of the world or to manipulate events on a global scale.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious conspiracy territory here. I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
I hear you, and honestly, I wouldn't recommend going too far down that road. I think it's important to keep an open mind and consider different possibilities.
Right.
But you also have to be realistic and not get caught up in speculation that isn't based on anything solid.
You have to find a balance between healthy skepticism, right?
Yeah.
And just being paranoid.
Exactly. But even if we don't believe the really outlandish theories, the fact that people are even having these conversations,
Right.
it tells you that there's this growing sense of anxiety about the world and about whether it's safe to fly.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
feels like people are losing trust in institutions, not just in the aviation industry.
Yeah.
I think we need more transparency and accountability to fix that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the facts of these 7 accidents, we've explored some scientific explanations, and we even dipped our toes into the world of conspiracy theories. But what does all of this mean for us, the everyday people who rely on planes to get around the world?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, this has been a lot to take in, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling it too.
It's heavy stuff, but I think it's in these moments when things feel uncertain
Yeah.
that we need to be the most engaged and informed. We have to be critical thinkers.
Okay, I think we need a minute to gather our thoughts here.
Yeah.
But when we come back, we're going to talk about what all of this means for the future of aviation. We'll explore what steps we can take, both individually and as a global community, to make sure we have safer skies in the years to come. Stay with us. So, we spent all this time looking at these aviation accidents, and I gotta say, I'm not exactly feeling super excited to book my next flight. It's like once you see how complicated all of this is and how vulnerable these systems are, it's hard not to think about everything that could go wrong. And some of the stuff we talked about, it's not exactly stuff you want to be thinking about when you're 30,000 feet in the air.
I get it. I mean, we've had to face some pretty hard truths about how safe flying really is these days,
Yeah.
from the pressure on the industry to the possibility that someone might be sabotaging these planes.
Right.
It's heavy stuff. But I think the important thing is that we don't let fear control us.
Right?
We have to use what we've learned to be proactive and make things safer.
You're right. Knowledge is power. So let's talk about solutions. Like, what can we actually do to make air travel safer in this world that feels increasingly kind of, well, scary?
Well, the good news is that there are things we can do, both as individuals and as a global community. We can take steps to reduce these risks and make aviation more resilient.
Okay, so let's start with what the industry itself can do. What changes need to happen, like at the airline level and with the people who regulate them?
I think the most important thing is that safety has to be the absolute top priority. Airlines can't just be focused on cutting costs all the time.
Right.
They need to be investing in things like really solid maintenance procedures, rigorous training programs,
Right.
and they need to create a culture where transparency and accountability are valued.
So they have to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to safety. No more cutting corners to make an extra buck.
Exactly. And it's not just the airlines themselves. Regulators, both here and in other countries, they need to step up their game too.
Okay.
We need stricter oversight, more inspections, and tougher penalties for airlines that break the safety rules.
So it sounds like everyone needs to be held accountable, from the CEOs down to the people working on the planes.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about technology? Can technology play a role in making flying safer?
Oh, absolutely. There's some really promising stuff being developed, like these advanced monitoring systems for aircraft.
Hmm.
They can actually spot potential problems before they become disasters. They use sensors and data analysis to give real-time information about how the plane's doing, so pilots and the maintenance crews know right away if something's not right.
So it's like giving the plane a checkup while it's in the air.
Yeah, pretty much. And there are also advancements in cybersecurity to protect those systems from hackers, things like stronger firewalls, encryption, and intrusion detection systems.
Okay, it's good to know that they're at least taking those threats seriously and trying to find solutions. But even with all this fancy technology, we can't forget that humans are still a big part of this.
That's right. The technology is only as good as the people using it.
Yeah.
So investing in training and education is huge. We need pilots who are not just good at flying, but who can also think critically and respond to tough
So
situations.
it's not enough to just know how to fly the plane. You have to be able to think on your feet when things get crazy.
Exactly. And it's not just the pilots. We need air traffic controllers who are highly trained, maintenance crews, and really everyone who works in aviation. They all need the knowledge and skills to deal with this increasingly complex world.
It sounds like a huge task,
Hmm.
but it's obviously necessary if we want flying to be safe.
Hmm.
What about us, though, the passengers? Is there anything we can do to be safer when we fly?
You might be surprised, but yeah, passengers actually can play a role.
Really?
It starts with being informed and paying attention. Do your research before you book that flight. Look into the airline safety record, read what other people have said about them,
Okay.
and stay updated on the latest news about safety and recommendations from the industry.
So don't just automatically book the cheapest flight.
Mhm.
Actually take the time to look into how safe the airline is, see if they're really committed to safety, and let that influence your decision.
Exactly. And once you're actually on the plane, be observant and really listen to that safety briefing. It might seem boring, but there's a reason they do it. And if you see something that seems off, don't be afraid to say something. Let the crew know.
It's like that see something, say something idea, but for air travel.
Exactly. You never know. You might actually prevent an accident from happening.
It's actually kind of empowering to know that even as passengers, we can do something to stay safe. But it also shows that everyone has a responsibility here.
That's a really important point. Aviation safety isn't just the responsibility of the airlines and the regulators. It's a team effort that includes everyone, from the people who design the planes to the passengers flying in them.
We're all in this together, right?
We are.
So, to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a feeling of hope. I mean, yeah, we've talked about some tough things and explored some pretty scary possibilities,
Right.
but we've also seen that things can change for the better. There's a lot of innovation happening, and we can all work together to make a difference.
I agree. The future of aviation isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it with the choices we make, the actions we take, and our commitment to safety.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here. It's been a really intense conversation, but I think it was important to have.
Yeah.
I hope it's left you all feeling more aware and, more importantly, that you feel like you have some power to make things safer. Fly safe, everyone.